I just wanted a warm welcome. Thank you all for joining us here for this evening's Incite, Kiss the Red Stairs with Marsha Lederman, presented in partnership between the Vancouver Public Library and the Vancouver Writers Fest. My name is Jorge Amigo. I'm the head of cultural programming here at VPL. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are hosting this event from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. As an immigrant from Mexico and a settler in these lands, it is very important for me to acknowledge that I'm grateful to work and live here, but also to use this opportunity to express my commitment to learning about the history and the ongoing effects of colonialism here, and to bring that awareness into my daily work as a public servant. So with that, I want to encourage all of you to read and understand the history of this land and the peoples who have taken care of it for thousands of years and what it means for all of you to be here. As you may be aware, this is the very first in-person event that we do since the pandemic began. Yeah, woo! So it's incredible and wonderful to be here to welcome you back. It's also the first Incite since 2020 in person here as well. Another applause. It's also my very first time representing VPL from this stage, so it's very exciting. So it's a pleasure to welcome you back to this venue. Now, as you can see from the cameras over there, this event is being live streamed and recorded, so if you have friends who were not able to make it and would want to see it, they have the option of seeing it afterwards. Now, before we get to the main event, I'm going to tell you about some upcoming programming that we have in person here at the library as well. So May, as you may know, is Asian Heritage Month, and we just launched a series called Uplift Asian, where we celebrate Asian voices in our communities. The next event in this series is next Tuesday, May 11th, and that's going to be with Lam Wong, the contemporary artist, up in the Montalbano room on Tuesday. He's going to show a film about tea and the art of Zen and tea mixed together. And after that film, he's going to give a talk about his wide-ranging art practice. And we have a bunch of other events coming up for that series, so 5 events in May. So you can see there's a poster over there. You can see more info. Now, I have a very important favor to ask you. Please, please, please turn your cell phones off. The beeps, the dings, the rings are very annoying, not only to your neighbors, but to the presenters on stage. They're very distracting. So take a moment right now. Turn your cell phones off. It'll make everyone's life much better in this room. I'm gonna wait for you to do that. Now, if you need to exit the room during the event, please use the back doors over there where Leah, my colleague, is standing. The washrooms happen to be located conveniently in front of those doors as well. So if you want to go to the bathroom, also use those doors. If there happens to be a fire alarm while we're here, BPL staff will tell you where to go. So just look at us. We'll be standing around telling you what to do if we're not panicking ourselves. We'll try to keep it cool. Now, without further ado, I'd like to invite to the stage Leslie Hurtig, the artistic director of the Vancouver Writers Festival.
Thank you, Jorge. It is so lovely to see you all here tonight. And on behalf of all of us at the Vancouver Writers Fest, we are thrilled to be in partnership with the Vancouver Public Library and TELUS this evening. And welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for helping us to celebrate this extraordinary book that you are all about to hear more about. I would like to also acknowledge our government sponsors, without whom we couldn't put on free events like this one. The Government of Canada, the Canada Council for the Arts, the BC Government, the BC Arts Council, the City of Vancouver, and CMHC Granville Island help organizations like ours to carry out our work. So thank you very much to them. Like Jorge, I want to let you know about a few events that are coming up. Not only do we have these free Incite events running every other Wednesday between now and June 1st, but also on May 30th, we've just announced a special event with actress, director, and writer Sarah Polley, and tickets for that are now on sale. You can just go to the Vancouver Writers Fest website to get more information about that one. We have a special guest in our audience here this evening. 35 years ago, Alma Lee founded the Vancouver Writers Fest. And not only that, but today is her birthday. And so I have a little something for you, Alma. Okay, on to the reason why we are all here this evening. I would just like to say, as a curator, sometimes finding just the right moderator for an event is a very tricky business. But I have been so fortunate to live in the same city with the Globe and Mail's Western Arts correspondent, Marsha Lederman. Marsha has been a tremendous friend to the Vancouver Writers Fest, and many of you will have seen her on our stages interviewing some of the most world-renowned writers that one could hope to ever see. And tonight we get to turn the microphone around and hear from her. It will be no surprise to any of you who follow her columns in the Globe and Mail or who have seen her on our stages that she's one of the most thoughtful, empathetic, and thorough readers and writers that you could hope to encounter. So it's no surprise that this new book, Kiss the Red Stairs, follows that exact same track record. Also with us tonight is another of our favorite moderators, Catherine Gretzinger. Catherine Gretzinger is now an associate professor of teaching at the School of Journalism, Writing, and Media at UBC. She is a longtime public broadcaster with the CBC and has been named one of North America's top educators in journalism. So please, without further ado, welcome to our stage Marsha Lederman and Catherine Gretzinger.
Well, I guess there's no going back now, is there? It is such a thrill to see so many of you out here tonight. This is a really important moment for my dear friend, and to get the word yesterday that 200 people were going to show up tonight, and another 200 people had signed up to be online to join us was really so thrilling. I just cannot thank you enough for this support. This book is astonishing, and I'm not just saying that. I'm really not. I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to open up, and Marsha's going to read for us tonight. We want to open the floor and be able to take some questions from some of you, and we're going to have an interesting conversation, I hope, that touches on many of the things that happen in the book and the story of her making this book. But we don't want to give away too much because it just came out yesterday, and so most of you haven't had a chance to crack it quite yet, and we don't want to blow it. So I just want to acknowledge that too. So don't worry, we're not going to be busting your chops today. I really am so honored to be here, literally holding my dear friend's life in my hands. This book, Kiss the Red Stairs, feels like such a gift. We often get to know people in personal ways, and we get to know them in private ways, but we very rarely get to learn about their interior lives and the things that motivate them and move them and change them and shape the way they are in this world. And this book really does that. The words "never again" we hear and we say as we grow up and we go to school, but those words really somehow felt like other. Those words felt like they were somehow separate until I read this book. And there was something about the magic of Marsha's beautiful language and the specificity that she gets into that really makes these words carry a whole bunch of weight. The book came out yesterday, as I mentioned. It's for sale. And we really want you to take copies of it home and pass it around, because we think that this is something that'll be important as we try to carry these words forward, especially given this time that we're living through. This story of Marsha's really gave me a chance to know her, but also to get to think about the way that she makes connections in this world. And let me just take a quick moment to situate us in this place. We've gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish peoples. And we acknowledge their presence here and the presence of the first peoples that came to these lands and to the lands around the world that are sometimes forgotten about. Marsha, in doing this work around intergenerational trauma, has gone about trying to knit these stories together. She's built bridges between people, between she and her sisters, between their parents, their families, Holocaust survivors, researchers. Those stories intersect in really powerful ways. And this book is a work of great love and probably even greater courage. Please welcome Marsha Lederman.
Can you tell that we are friends, obviously? I just have to say that was so beautiful. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you she's really read the book very deeply and closely. And about 5 minutes ago, she had a nosebleed backstage. So if she passes out, if anyone here wants to take her place.
Erica Johnson is in the third row,
Okay.
and we'll be calling on her to pop up here.
Thank you.
Let me start
Beautiful.
by saying, and this will come clear in a moment, I think you are amazing.
Thank you. That's from the book.
For Jacob is the dedication of this book.
Oh, now I'm going to cry already.
Well, we'll get that over with, and then we
Okay.
can get down to business. This book really is his history, something that you'll be able to give him. But he's 13. What's the plan?
He's going to go to medical school. Literally, so Jacob is my son. He's 13. Literally, we were at the dentist yesterday, and the dentist was great. And I said to him, do you want to talk to my son about dentistry as a career? Do you enjoy being a dentist? And the dentist thought I was crazy. As did Jacob. So yes, Jacob is my 13-year-old son. His name is Jacob Lederman, and my father's name was Jacob Lederman. And he is very funny and too smart for his own good. And he did read the prologue and then pronounced it too boring to continue, which is probably not the thing I should say if I want people to buy books. No. But everyone's a critic, right? I wanted him, I did want him to have the answers that I didn't have and that I had to go searching for as I was writing this book and didn't always get. So I wanted to give him as much information as I could. That's not the only reason I wrote the book, of course, and not even the primary reason, but the book really is, it's not just dedicated to him, it is for Jacob.
And we'll come back to Jacob toward the end, because it's been a big year for him, and it'll be nice to wrap with that. Let's talk about your family. Both your mother and your father were Holocaust survivors. They survived in very, very different ways. Shall we talk about your mother first?
Sure. Let's talk about my mom. My mother's name, she had several names, and if you read the book, you'll see there are a lot of names, sorry. I think of her as Gutcha mostly, but her name when she was born was Gitla. And she was born in a place called Radom, Poland. It's about an hour, 2 hours outside of Warsaw. And she was born in 1925. In September of 1939, she was excited to be starting school, and instead the Nazis invaded Poland on September the 1st, and she couldn't go to school. And in fact, she would never go to formal school. Again, that was the end of her education. She was 14. The family was forced out of their home. They had a nice apartment into the ghetto. One day on the streets of the ghetto, my mom was walking with her friend Hella, and an officer came up to them and said, "You have to come to work." And he was a guard in charge of setting up the barracks for the guards who would be staying in the ghetto. So my mom, that she was 15 then, excuse me, was hauling furniture around, doing like hard labor, hard to imagine. I have a 13-year-old, like I just can't imagine him having to do that kind of thing. And then they were forced to live there. My mother, her friend Hella, and a few other girls were forced to live in those barracks with these Nazi soldiers. And it sounds horrible, and it was, but it saved her life because they were there working when the ghettos were liquidated, and my grandparents and my mother's little brother were sent to Treblinka and murdered there. So what happened to my mother? At that point, the barracks were no longer needed because there were no Jews left in Radom, or very few. So she was, again, worried about what her fate would be. If she didn't have work, that meant the end. There was no reason for her to be kept alive. But she was sent to a munitions factory in the same city. She worked there for a few years, and then in August of 1944, she was sent to Auschwitz. And she arrived and had her head shaved and had her arm tattooed, and it was horrible. But then she was reunited with her sister, who she hadn't seen in years at this point. They were reunited at Auschwitz, and an aunt, their mother's youngest sister. For 3 months, they kept each other alive. Mostly they kept my mother alive because she was very sick with typhus, but had to work hauling boulders. It was not real work. It was fake work, just for torture. After 3 months, miraculously, all three of them were part of a group that were sent back into Germany to a satellite camp of Buchenwald in a city called Lippstadt, where, again, they were made to make munitions for their captors. And it was a better situation than Auschwitz, for sure. At the end of March 1945, the women were all ordered to leave because the Allies were closing in and the Germans were trying to get these slave laborers somewhere safer, away from the Allies. And they were marching to Bergen-Belsen, which was a horrible place. It's where Anne Frank died. After 3 days, one early morning, a Sunday, all of a sudden the German guards were gone. Where did they go? The women didn't know what to do. Do we stay? So they just sat in this meadow waiting. And then along came these tanks, and on the tanks, I don't know much about military, obviously, American soldiers came and liberated them and gave them chocolates and food and respect, something they didn't have for all those years, and also gave them the homes of the German people who lived there in this town called Kaunitz, and said, the Jewish women get to live there. There were about 700 of them. And it was in that city that she met my dad.
It's an incredible story, and it's one where you'll see as you read the book, all these coincidences happen along the way that allow her to maintain herself and her independence as she's working through those conditions.
Yeah, people often say, how did you survive? How did you survive? You can't say it's because she was strong, she was smart. It was luck, it was coincidence, circumstance, it was good people coming in to help. It was, and sure, yes, it was her her strength too, but there were many strong people who did not survive. And, you know, it was often, they said, especially for women, it was friendship, other women helping each other. And that is something that I have known in my own life.
Your father survived because of his wits.
Yeah.
And he made a play that saved his life.
He did. What he did was amazing. And I'm going to read about it. Is that okay?
That'd be great.
Okay, I'm going to read this part about my dad. You know, I said I wanted to read it from there, but I think I would like to just read it sitting down.
Whatever you like.
That's okay. Is that all right? Thank you. My father had a job in the ghetto. I do not know how he managed to obtain this life-saving work. I assume he was selected because of his strength or his smarts, maybe for his excellent German, or was it his experience working with textiles that landed him this golden ticket? I know little about the actual job he was doing. Cleaning things up is what I've always imagined, but maybe he was sewing or building or destroying. The encyclopedia, though, described horrific chores forced on the Jews of the Pietrkov ghetto, digging canals and trenches, removing tons of earth, the slaves working up to their knees in water all day, or removing large amounts of earth from a pit while foremen with sticks would beat them. That same entry also recounts a terrible scene. Some of those workers, they were employed in a glass factory, witnessed the trains departing for Treblinka, heard the cries of their desperate family and friends, saw their hands groping at the window gratings. The story that I do know is of my father's final day on the job, of his escape. I am unsure if this happened before the deportations or afterward, but we think it was before. Some vile commandant told his workers to line up. He announced that every 10th, or was it every 5th, man would be selected for execution that day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, my father. This story, the defining story of my father's life and the reason I am here to tell it, was recounted to me secondhand. I did not hear it from him directly, but from my mother long after he died. My father begged one of the Nazis overseeing this seemingly rogue operation for his life. He did not appeal to the guard's humanity. He was too smart for that. Humanity, please. Jacob offered concrete rewards. He had a watch with him somehow, a good one, gold. He offered it to the soldier, who of course would have been able to take it off Jacob's dead wrist immediately after shooting him, or order another Jew to do so and hand it over. The watch, though, was just a tease. My father had more to offer. He told that Nazi executioner that he had a cache of jewelry hidden back at home. Jacob would dig it up and bring it to that monster in exchange for his life. This negotiation was all happening in the pre-execution frenzy. The Nazi said he would think about it. He ordered my father to hide. He sent him to a tiny room, a basement bathroom is how I have pictured it, but I doubt that is accurate. And there my father crouched and waited, shaking, hearing the shots murdering his every 10th friend, or was it every 5th, knowing that one of those bullets had been destined for his head, and still could be, depending on how things went. My father was able to keep track of time. He still had that watch, and he was there for hours. He could not see what was going on beyond the closed door that kept him hidden, but you can imagine what he was imagining. At last, the door opened. The guard, probably trying to keep this deal secret from his colleagues, had waited until there was no one else around. He took my father's watch and told him to go get those jewels and bring them back in the morning. Then he would be able to continue to work, continue to live. Weak with the trauma and confinement of the day, my father bolted as best he could. He ran to the jewels, because there actually were jewels. That much was true. They were hidden at the home, in the ghetto where the family had been staying. At least that's where I think they were. But they were not destined for that Nazi whose greed overcame his desire to be a good soldier that day. My father was too smart to take that chance. What would stop that pig from shooting him as soon as he had the valuables? It occurs to me now that this soldier might have been very young, maybe 19 years old, a kid. If this happened before the deportations, as we believe it did, then when my father went back to his place in the ghetto, his parents and little brother and big sister would have been there. He would have told them the story. My sister Doris thinks at that point they told him to run away to save his own life. Maybe the valuables were handed to him directly by his mother, Sarah, or his father, Moshe Aaron. Did they pack them in a little bundle, place them in a tiny bag? My father would have taken those valuables, and then he would have had to say goodbye. My father took his bribe and his breaking heart and took off into the night. He had heard about a Polish official who would issue fake documents for a price. He knew where that official lived. In the darkness, he made his way out of the ghetto to that man's home and gathered the courage to knock on the door. I suppose when your life is on the line, the courage somehow presents itself. To leave the ghetto alone was a treacherous proposition. The dangers for a Jew at that time, especially outside the ghetto, were immense. Anyone could turn him in, not just a soldier, but someone out for a stroll who spotted him, a child even who had been fed evil rhetoric about the Jews, or who simply noticed a strange, skinny man on the street. Some zealous citizen could have killed him on the spot, become a hero for taking matters into their own hands and doing away with a Jew on the loose. There might have been a reward. There would have been no record of Jacob's death, of his life. It was with that knowledge that my father left the ghetto for this Polish official's home. A woman answered. My father explained his reason for being there. She told him her husband was out, but that he could come in and wait. She amazingly let him into the house. Perhaps they talked then, which would help the next part of the story make sense. When her husband returned home, he was not happy to find this man, this Jew, inside. "Who is this?" he snarled, as I imagine it. "What is he doing here?" My father made his case and his proposal. "Please, can you help me? I have these things to offer you." I don't know what was in that package. His parents' wedding rings, a Star of David in gold, silver candlesticks, jewels taken from other ghetto inmates. It didn't matter. The official was not interested in helping. Maybe he was thinking about what the punishment would be if he was found out. Death. Maybe he was feeling some heat from the brass, some suspicion. Maybe he just didn't feel like doing it that day. Maybe he didn't need or couldn't stomach the sight of more stolen valuables. "No," he said. "No." My father's shot, gone. What did Jacob feel in that moment? Did he start to die a little bit? Did whatever hope for life he had maintained begin to dissolve into defeat? Or, ever resourceful, did he quickly begin plotting alternate strategies? And then the Polish official's wife spoke up. This woman, this saint, took pity upon my father. "A gentle soul," she said. "Look at his eyes," she said, "his beautiful eyes." My father did have remarkable eyes, a piercing shade of blue, clear and bright. You might say Aryan. There was something in his eyes, maybe it wasn't the color, but the sorrow, that made this woman pressure her husband to help my father. Or perhaps it was the conversation she may have had with my father while waiting for her husband to come home, or the way my father waited, patiently and anxiously, as if his life depended on it, which of course it did. Maybe that man loved his wife very much. Maybe he too saw something in my father's eyes, or maybe he just didn't want the aggravation of a domestic impasse. He went to get the papers together. And his wife, this woman whose name I will never know and to whom I owe my life, prepared something for my father to eat, his first meal all day, and his first decent meal in who knows how long. It was Jacob Meyer Lederman's last meal. After that day, he became Tadeusz Rudnicki, Polish Catholic. Tadek.
Marsha, you mentioned that that's not a story that your father told you. You had to piece it together through conversation. This book is so deeply researched. Where did you even begin to try to figure out how to knit together that narrative?
So this is a huge regret of mine that I did not get the story sequentially from my parents themselves, certainly not from my father. So my father died really unexpectedly while he was on a trip, just after my 18th birthday. And, you know, I was a teenager. I wasn't that interested in his stories, and I didn't ask, and then I lost my chance. My mother, however, did tell me quite a few stories from her life, and then she told me some stories from his life. That was one of the stories she told me. And again, though, she didn't tell me everything. Like, A happened, and then B, and then C. I had to knit this all together, as you say. And she did a video for the Shoah Foundation that Steven Spielberg started after he made Schindler's List, and told her story there. She was in a documentary. She told her story there. She did tell me, I had her on a radio show that I hosted, and she told me some of her story there. But again, it was never the whole story. In January of 2006, I was talking to her on the phone. I was working at the CBC at the time in Toronto. She was down in Florida, where she spent winters, and she didn't sound great. She said she wasn't feeling well. She sounded kind of sad. And I said, you know what? I'm going to come down and spend some time with you. And I booked my flight. I booked a few days off work, and I decided that this was going to be the time. It was just going to be the two of us in this Florida condo. I was going to bring my tape recorder and my notepad and get the whole story. But she died that night, and I never got to go. So, years later, I tried to knit the story together, remembering what she had told me, watching those videos and films, which, by the way, were not very detailed. My sisters and I watched this show a video, and we're all like, we would have done a better job of asking these questions. Why didn't she ask for details? And of course, you know, for me, it's a huge regret, especially for me. I mean, I'm a journalist. I ask questions for a living, and I didn't ask the most important questions of the most important people. And here I am, you know, spending years trying to figure it out, reading other people's stories to try and learn about the circumstances that my parents themselves might have been facing. And yeah, it's a huge regret. So if you have family members, older family members, ask them the questions, please. Do it. Do it.
You first started asking questions. They might not have been the questions, but you started asking questions of your parents when you were a little kid, coming home one particular day after spending a day with your buddy, asking your mom, how come you didn't have grandparents?
Yeah.
Her response kind of floored you at that time and left you with great big questions that are the same questions that you're asking in these pages.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know I was asking her a question about the Holocaust. I was just like, this friend of mine, Pearl, has grandparents, and they come over and they give her money and gifts, and they pinch her cheeks. Like, they're so nice. Why don't I have these people? And my mother said, and you know, maybe I remembered it wrong. I keep saying that, but it's like fused in my brain what she said to me. And she said, you don't have grandparents because the Germans hated the Jews and they killed them in gas showers. That's what happened to your grandparents. So I was 5. I didn't ask any follow-up questions because I was way too freaked out. And, you know, the questions that were going around in my head were, first of all, I was trying to picture these gas showers, like how does that work? Does gas come out instead of water? How does that kill you exactly? And then, I was 5. What's a German? I didn't even know that. And also, like, do they still hate us? Like, what did we do to make them hate us? And do they still? Like, that was a very scary thought to me. And so that kind of shut down that conversation. I did not, and I think, not really consciously, but I think I came away from that encounter thinking, be careful what you ask, because the answers can be really, really difficult.
So I'm going to zigzag around a little bit, just in the interest of time and making sure that we have time for all of your questions. So you're setting off in your career as a journalist. You are working at the CBC, then you go over and you're working at the Globe and Mail. Life is good. You're creating a family, and then postpartum depression visits itself upon your life. When did you realize that there was something going on for you that was beyond just sort of this heaviness after having your baby? When did you realize there might be a connection between these things?
Oh, I think years later, actually. At the time, I knew I was just exhausted. I had a premature baby. I was 42 years old. I was tired anyway. I had no family here. I had very few friends at the time. I was alone. And I had a baby that woke up every hour or every 2 hours if I was lucky. And it was really hard. So I didn't know, was I just exhausted? Was I depressed? Was this postpartum depression? Anyway, there was an amazing process at the time, which I don't think exists anymore. In fact, I know it doesn't exist. No matter who you were, the day after you brought your baby home from the hospital, a public health nurse came to your home for a visit, right? So good. And my public health nurse could tell something was not right. And my public health nurse came back to my house like once a week regularly, called me, checked in, and got me into the clinic at BC Women's, God love them. And I saw a counselor there, and she really helped me. And then I had my sisters come out and visit me, and my 2 best friends came from Toronto, and things just started getting a little better.
Every time in your life that you started to see a therapist, people would ask questions about, your parents were Holocaust survivors, and yeah, I've got other problems. So there was this kind of zigzaggy thing. So when you were going through this experience after Jacob's birth, and you started to think about how am I dealing with what's going on for me differently than some other people, when did you start to have the wheels going in your mind that, there might be something that happened to the generation before me that might be having an impact on me?
So it was a few years after Jacob was born, and my life was kind of busting up. And I was not sleeping a lot, and I was doing a lot of doom scrolling at night, Googling stuff, and a few things were going on. I felt like I needed the comfort of my parents. I felt like I needed unconditional love, which I didn't have. And so I started reading about the Holocaust, because that's what you do when you're looking for comfort. It just was a way to bring them close to me, and it was also perspective. Yeah. It was like, yeah, things are not great right now, but it could be worse. You could be in Auschwitz, which I know sounds crazy to normal people listening, watching, but it's a thing. I think my sisters do it too. But then the other thing is, around this time, there were studies coming out, scientific studies, looking at intergenerational trauma, specifically in children of Holocaust survivors. And the hypothesis was that, well, it wasn't even a hypothesis, the conclusion of this study was that the trauma was migrating from the actual survivor to the offspring. And it was migrating not just as a result of environment in the home, it was migrating at the cellular level. There was something going on epigenetically that made it more difficult for me to deal with stressful situations.
And you were in a big stressful situation because your marriage was starting to shake at the time.
It was a stressful situation, Catherine.
Yeah, yes, it was. I remember. And you kept going with these questions and this research and this idea that there was something to discover, that you could somehow knit yourself, well, again, that word, but come back to your parents and get close to them through experiencing all of this yuck.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Good question. It just, as I say, it was like it started as a comfort project and then it became sort of a project. And around the same time, my sister, Rachel, my oldest sister, went back to Poland on a research trip. And she found out some very stunning things. And when she conveyed these to me during a visit where she was coming to where my sister, it was yet another rescue mission, my sister's coming to help me. She was telling me this particular story and like a light bulb went off and I thought, this is something I need to do. There is a pilgrimage, a project here for me, and I'm going to throw myself into this. And it helped me. It helped me to focus on something, and it felt like it was a way, again, to get closer, not just to my parents, but to the grandparents I had never known.
And to your sisters, who became real co-conspirators in all of this. There's loads of research from both Doris and Rachel, finding things out, listening to other people's stories. Were they nervous at all about you going on this journey and trying to kind of put this piece together?
Well, they were nervous about the book. What are you going to say about us? Was a concern. But no, they were, oh my God, they were just amazing. Like really, I feel like they co-wrote the book with me. They were so helpful. And it did, in many ways, bring us closer together because the bulk of this was happening, the writing, during the pandemic. And
it was not supposed to be that way.
No, it was not. The pandemic was not supposed to happen. I was supposed to take a book leave. I was so excited. I think it was 4 or 5 months that I was going to take off.
And you were packed. Actually, you were that close.
Oh yeah. Well, I was 1 week into my book leave when and I was about to go to Poland. My flight was scheduled March 12th, 2020 at noon. I was supposed to fly out of YVR. My bag was by the door. Someone was coming to pick me up at 9 a.m. and I pulled the plug in the middle of the night after the former president of the United States closed the border with Europe. I thought, if this guy, this COVID denier, is closing the border, something is really serious here. And so I didn't go. Thank goodness, because I would have been stuck in Poland and by myself, a language I don't speak, it would have been bad. But yeah, getting back to my sisters, we started doing these FaceTime calls, which we'd never done. I mean, I think we've all had this experience where now we always Zoom or FaceTime. And we did it on the regular, and it started off with me asking my 15 questions and, talking about Auschwitz and Treblinka and, as sisters do. And then, then we'd talk about our lives, and it was really great. It was really great.
In the book, you write that the state of victimhood is where I live.
Yeah.
Is that still the case?
I'm really working on it. I'm working really hard on it. It's so easy to feel like a victim, and I think that is one of the biggest sort of symptoms of this intergenerational trauma that I believe I suffer from, that I'm always looking for the slight. I'm always looking for the injustice against me. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop, because things don't turn out well for the likes of me, for the likes of us. But it's not good. It is extremely unhealthy. And in doing all this research, and a lot of it was really brutal, but some of it was beautiful. The writings of Viktor Frankl, Ava Hoffman, who lived here for a little while in Vancouver, Edith Eger. This book was very important to me, called The Choice. And they really helped me see how, of course, we can't control our circumstances always, but we can control how we respond to them. And I'm tired of responding to everything like a victim.
As I read it, I was thinking, right from the disappointment of not being able to go on what you call the trip of a lifetime, you bounced back from that much more quickly than I had witnessed you bouncing back from other things over the last 25 years. And there was something sort of a sturdiness to your, okay, well, now I'm going to have to look across the street at the playground and get busy imagining. How did you turn that corner and just start to let the story come?
Well, let's get back to Jacob. I had a son at home. Many of us suddenly had kids at home that we had to homeschool or entertain or do something with. I had to be cheerful for him. I couldn't be freaked out because I didn't want him to freak out. So I had to be strong and focus on him. And I canceled my book leave immediately because I work for a newspaper. I couldn't not be working for a newspaper. It was all hands on deck, global pandemic, big deal. I wanted to be part of that. And so I went back to work. I didn't even contact HR. I was just like, okay, I'm filing on this, I'm filing on that. And Jacob was there, and he was 11. It wasn't like a little kid that I had to watch. He had a lot of screen time. And I worked for the next few months, and I would get up, I'd get up at 4 or 5 most days and work on the book. And then once Jacob woke up, get him going on whatever device, and then I would... And then I'd go to work. I'm obviously still in my bedroom where my desk is, and I would work for the Globe stuff. And then I took, I think it was June and July of 2020 off to full-time write the book.
And it was like you were in a tunnel. You would send a text, tomorrow we'll walk, we'll get together, and it was just this mission to plow through. And when did you realize you had it? That there was something here at what stage? Because the book is dense, it's full, it's rich with stories. There's many, many, many narratives that you'll discover as you go through. You were always questioning, I don't know if there's anything here, I don't know if this is gonna, on and on. But there was a moment that you went, it's here, I got it, I figured it out. Remember?
There was? No, I don't actually. Do tell, Catherine. I actually don't remember that. I remember it being like a slow drip of. Give me a hint.
Rachel's story.
Oh yeah, Rachel's story. Okay, yeah. So that was. Oh, I feel like I already covered that ground a little bit, but yes, when Rachel was in town helping, Rachel and Doris had both been here, but. Actually, again, this is serendipity. Doris and Rachel were going home. I was driving them to the airport. Something was wrong with the car. And I couldn't drive them to the airport. It was making a noise. So Doris had to take a cab to get to the airport. Her flight was coming up. And we got the car dealt with, and Rachel was sitting with me in the kitchen and started telling me the story that leads to the title of the book, and the story that made me realize I had to write this down. And that was 2016. That's going back. Yeah, and then although I didn't know it was a book yet, I don't think. I think at that point it was just like it was a project, and I did start taking notes because that's what I do because I forget everything. Like I even forgot that, and I guess at some point I'm looking at these notes and thinking this could be a book, and then I started writing an outline, and I have a dear friend who happens to be the publisher of McClelland and Stewart. Actually, he wasn't then, or he was actually my editor at the Globe and Mail at the time. And then, anyway, he became publisher of M&S. And he said, yes, this is the book. You have to write this book. And he encouraged me, and I kept writing.
So as if a family story, the Holocaust, postnatal depression, marriage coming about wasn't enough. You decided that you really wanted to take on intergenerational trauma in a different way and really look at what was happening in Indigenous communities across the country as well. A profound experience took place, and I'm really wondering if you would talk about the witness blanket.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, you can't talk about intergenerational trauma in this country without talking about Indigenous people, without talking about residential schools and colonization and the horrific impacts of that we did. And I was, for my job, I write about art mostly. I write about the arts. And I was going to Victoria to interview an artist whose name is Carrie Newman. He was making something he was going to call the witness blanket. And it was going to be a large installation memorializing victims and survivors of residential schools. And what he was going to do, there is a giant fly on my finger right
Yes,
now.
and it's real. So
yeah, okay. He was making these enormous panels, and he was going to weave onto them artifacts from residential schools and from the religious institutions that ran them and the government institutions of the day. And amazing, right? So I went to meet him, and he was showing me, it was very early stages. He was planning it out, he was drawing it, and he had gone and had sent some people on some gathering trips to bring things back. And one of the things he showed me that morning was a shoe from Carcross, Yukon, in a little Ziploc bag, like a child's shoe. No idea what happened to this child, of course. But the shoe brought me right back to Majdanek, which is a concentration camp in Poland that I had visited. And when you visit there, you go into barrack after barrack after barrack filled with shoes, floor to ceiling, shoes of the victims who were murdered there. So I look at this shoe and I'm thinking, Majdanek, shoe, a parallel. And then we sat down for the interview to talk. And he told me about his dad going to residential school, being forced to go to residential school when he was 8 or 9, and how traumatized he was by the first thing that happened to him when he got there. They shaved his head. And I'm back at Auschwitz with my mother having her head shaved. And Carrie and I have talked quite a few times since then. I mean, I've written about that witness blanket. I watched it grow. I watched it being developed. I saw it the first time it was installed at Victoria City Hall. It's an amazing piece that I highly recommend everyone see if you can. It's it's invested in the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology. It's not owned by the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. It has its own ownership. It's really quite an amazing thing that he's done. But in talking with him, and then I eventually did get to meet his father and his sisters, and
his sisters actually cut their braids off and gave them to their brother as a part of what he could knit onto
the witness blanket. And they did that as tribute to their father losing his hair. And when I was at Auschwitz visiting a long time ago with my mother and my sisters, my sister pointed out a braid that was in the piles of hair that you see at Auschwitz. And my mother had had braids too as a little girl. So there are all these parallels, all of these parallel traumas, different but, so meaningfully connected, I think. And I do think we need these communities. We need to talk to each other more and help each other more. I would love to be part of that in some way.
Well, you are, aren't you? Because Carrie Newman actually asked you to be a witness.
Yes.
Not just a journalist coming to cover and write your beautiful words about the project, but actually to hold it in your heart and carry what you witnessed forward.
Yes,
Big
so
change.
there was a ceremony held in near Comox at the Longhouse there, and in which the witness blanket was, again, invested, or I can't remember the exact word, but given to the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. But the rights remain with the blanket itself. No one owns that work. The work is its own entity. It's quite amazing. And they had this ceremony to mark this acquisition. And Carrie called me and asked me to come. And he said, "You don't have to write about it. I just want you to be there." And I went. I did write about it for the Globe because I felt I was so moved by it. But I also participated in the ceremony, which is not something I would normally do. And I danced in the Longhouse with the others, and it was beautiful. And I became a witness, and I agreed as a witness to continue to tell the story. So thank you for asking me about it. And it's very important to me that I got to tell a bit of the story in the book because I am a witness. And I believe that everyone who reads this book becomes a witness to Carrie's story, but also to mine.
You actually write, when you learn about something, it becomes a part of your own story. Carrie Newman's is part of yours, and I hope this will become the next person's, and so on and so on. So it's almost like a call. You want to call and response, and people to carry it forward in that way.
There's an amazing woman, Jude, of course, so amazing that I can't remember her name. She was a survivor of Auschwitz, and she was there the same year I was there on a tour. It's called March of the Living. They bring students from all over the world to Auschwitz, to Poland, tour these sites, and then you march from Auschwitz to Birkenau, like this sea of resilience, all of us wearing these blue jackets. It was actually quite amazing. But this woman, I think her name is Judy, I'm so sorry, she's in the book. She, in a documentary that I watched about the March of the Living, she tells the kids, the high school students, you are now witnesses. This story is now yours, because she told them her story. And that was very important to me. That was a real guide to me. And I wrote to her and asked if I could use those words. And also I'd interviewed her for a documentary years ago that I did in Toronto radio. And she remembered me, and I don't remember her name. And she was so lovely. And these people are just amazing. They're just amazing, these survivors.
One of the women who really helped with the research here is a woman called Andrea,
Yeah.
who you've never had a chance to meet, but she was sort of eyes and ears on the ground. How did you come to connect with her, and what do you think it was about your story that made her want to connect so deeply and go down the rabbit hole with you?
So Andrea Tabart is a journalist and researcher living in Cologne, Germany. When my sisters and I decided we wanted to go back to, I was going to Poland by myself, but we were going to meet in Germany. We're going to look for the farm where my father survived the war. We realized we needed some help. I said to my sisters, I'll rent a car. There's Google Maps. It'll be fine. We'll drive around. And my sisters were like, I think we should get someone to help us. And they were right. So through a bunch of connections. My nephew's wife knew someone who knew someone who knew someone who worked for the German tourist board, who decided it was going to be it was his mission to help me, and he found me someone who was going to be our guide, like our fixer there, who spoke German, and he also found us Andrea. I think she pronounces her name Andrea. Andrea. I had to say it for the audiobook, and I stumbled over it every time. And she was amazing. She would send these emails. They were like poetry, telling us what she found, being so gentle with us. Nacht Canada is how she would start them, and she still does. Anytime she comes across anything about intergenerational trauma, she's still sending us stuff. And it became her journey, and she wrote to us that it was the most important work she'd done in her life, and I can't believe I still haven't met her. But one day I'm going to get to Germany, and I'm going to meet her, and I'm going to see that farm, Google Maps or guide or however I'm going to get there.
Right. What you'll find as you read the book is there are all kinds of people who very generously share little tidbits of stories that Marsha's been able to put together, almost like a collage of these stories coming and sort of coalescing around your parents' story and then taking us off on these trips. Your writing is astonishing. Yes, of course, I've got to say something nice. I really do. But it is. I was doing a piece with Ed Yong a few weeks ago at the university, and he writes for The Atlantic, and it covers the COVID crisis, has been for the last couple of years. And he just wrote a piece about grief. And he said that because he knew that the terrain he'd be in for that particular story was going to be so difficult, he owed it to his audience to make it beautiful. And I kept thinking through the whole thing, that's exactly what you've done.
Wow, thank you for saying that. I owe it to all the people I'm writing about. Listen, there's horrific information in this book, but it's not a horrific book, I hope. I wanted to inject it with light and poetry and joy and humor. That was very important to me because that's also who I am. I wanted it to be a reflection of who I am. And I feel like the best way, if you're interested in becoming a writer, the best thing to do is to read. And I was reading the best books as I was writing this, and I think that helped me to write in that way.
I want to wrap with Jacob, and I do think we're going to take some questions from the audience. We're going to have to ask you to, if you're able, to stand and try to speak as loudly as possible, and then I'll re-ask your question so that the audience watching at home can pick it up. But before we get to the audience, I do want to talk about the kid. Jacob was bar mitzvahed just a few months ago, went through the ceremony, and he did not want to do this. And the Rabbi Dan, who really is an amazing guy to listen to, talked about this and talked about the fact that Jacob Lederman, the second, did this for his mom because he knew how important this would be for her. So I'd like you to talk for a minute about what it was like that day in the synagogue as you were looking out at all your chosen family and your family members and people around you to watch your kid speaking a language that would have been spoken by his grandparents.
It was amazing. My brother-in-law, Sam, brought, and my sister Doris brought the talit, the prayer shawl that had belonged to my father. They brought it from Toronto or Hamilton, where they live, and Jacob wore it for the ceremony. And it was really a beautiful ceremony where I could talk about that prayer shawl and what it meant to me, and talking about the first Jacob Lederman and how I felt, how Jacob, my son, is a miracle, because the fact that my parents survived is miraculous. And that was another thing the rabbi said that day. He said, think of all that had to happen, all of those things to come together for you to be here today, to Jacob. And that blew me away. But so did his comment to Jacob that, sometimes part of growing up, like a bar mitzvah, you turn 13, you're a Jewish boy, and you're a man, apparently, according to Judaism. But so this is like a rite of passage. But part of what the rabbi said is part of growing up is knowing that sometimes you have to do things for other people. It's not all about you. And you did this for your mom, and that's really grown up. Like, how amazing was that?
The most amazing thing was that Jacob, who's very quick with a quip, I'm sure that would shock you, given who his mother is, but he really held that moment. You could watch him just look around and then look at his mom with this big proud grin. Now, he took the microphone away from both of his parents just a few minutes later out the back to have some food, but so he had his moment in that way too, but it was really powerful, and I just can't help imagining what it's going to be like for him to hold this and read it and really understand the story that you've given back to him.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I think he's clearly not ready for it yet. Boring, #boring. But I think he will appreciate it one day. I know he will appreciate it one day.
He sure will. All right, so I think we'd love to take a few questions. If there are folks in the audience who have... Do you think we should give Alma Lee the first... I don't... Yes? Of course, Alma. So I'll have you say it, and then I'll try to state it back so that they can hear.
I want to ask a question.
Oh.
I just want to tell you and the audience, I have programmed hundreds of events for the Writers Festival, and this is one of the best ones I've ever done.
Thank you.
You might not know this, but Marsha's very bossy, so she actually really handed over and said, "Let's go, let's do this." So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alma, and happy birthday.
Yeah,
Thank
happy
you.
birthday, and thanks for the festival.
Yeah.
I think we're all the better for it.
Yeah.
Who wants to ask Marsha Lederman a question? Raquel, I see you. You always have questions. Helen Slinger, I see you too. You have questions, please.
Thank you for coming, both of you, Marsha and Catherine. Where do I start? Oh, you mentioned one of the authors you read was Viktor Frankl, and his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Sounds like your book was a search for meaning as well. And you said that after Jacob was born, you experienced trauma and depression sometime after that. And one person who was noticeably absent in your discussion tonight was Jacob's father. And I wonder what role did his father play in Jacob's life, in your life, and in the life of the book? And if you feel uncomfortable,
No, I can answer this. So just to repeat, he was asking about Jacob's father. What role did he play? Jacob has an amazing dad who is so like the best co-parent you could ever ask for. And the book does not go into much detail about that, not because I didn't want to write about it, but just because I respect his privacy. I respect Jacob's privacy sometimes, and other family members. So yeah, he is absent from the story, but he's very much in Jacob's life. He's awesome.
And he's thanked in black and white in the acknowledgments, so you'll see it there too. So
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
the question.
okay, please. Aw.
Hello.
Hello.
That was wonderful, thank you. I'm wondering about the leap as a journalist with all those standards that you would have had to make to have these scenes where you're using the I imagine language, or permission for words in the mouth. I think that for fictional writers that comes naturally, but did you have a period of time where you had to decidedly just let go of some of your hard journalistic rules? What was that like?
Do Do you want to summarize?
So this is a question about whether Marsha was comfortable, what it was like for her to do the imaginative work and not sort of be the fact gatherer or the evidence builder, the way that a journalist tends to be. So that's a really wonderful question. Thank you.
It's a great question. I had started out hoping it would be all facts, like this is what happened in this and this and this. Couldn't happen. I could not get the facts. So it was actually, I think it was my journalistic instinct that made me make it clear that I'm imagining. I imagine this. Like I imagine the guy snarling at my father. What is this Jew doing in the house? But yeah, some of that was difficult, but it was actually really fun and liberating. It was liberating to be able to imagine and write about it. We're not allowed to do that at the Globe and Mail. Some people might disagree.
Anyone else please in the back row.
I'm so grateful for this book at this juncture. For me personally, I'm coming just as I'm starting to dig into my Japanese Canadian family history, and have been looking for, ways in. And so, heard your interview on CBC Radio yesterday, and thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I need to read. So, my question for you is, how do you deal with the rage?
Do you want to summarize?
This very pointed question is, how do you deal with the rage?
Oh my God. We should have a drink.
In fact.
No. I get so angry sometimes, and I don't know what to do with it. I specifically feel the rage around Holocaust denial, around acts of anti-Semitism, around anti-Semitic microaggressions, which happen on Twitter all the time. And I can't handle it. I can't confront it. I can't fight with people. I can't debate. I just shut down. So that's probably not the best way to deal with it, I guess. I guess I should go for a run. But yeah, the rage, it's here. Like nothing boils my blood like something, even today. So I assume most people know about what's going on with the Supreme Court in the U.S., Roe v. Wade. And there are all these conspiracy theories that are being thrown around Twitter and wherever. QAnon is responsible for a lot of this, what they're basically implying is that it's a Jewish thing. Why are the Jews doing this? The Jews are promoting abortion. I mean, I'm paraphrasing very badly, but I was looking at this afternoon while I was getting ready for this event, which was, again, bad move. Don't go on Twitter when you're preparing for something. And I was enraged. I was so angry. And I just had to shut it down and walk away and brush my hair. So I'm sorry, that's a terrible answer. I don't know. I'm still working on it.
You can, when you're reading the book, you'll be able to feel the rage in the words. There's really, it's really heat and light. It goes off on these beautiful tangents of these lovely, elegant words and these descriptive paragraphs. And then when there's descriptions of what happened to people, you'll see the rage coming through the words. It's a really interesting experience as a reader. So that was another thing I was wanting to explore, but on another night we can do that.
Sure, part two. I should say writing helped with the rage. I should say that. Thank you for reminding me. Told you I forget everything.
Writing is thinking, writing is feeling, and we are going to wrap. I think we have one more question.
Okay, hello.
No, thank you very much. I'm going to this woman on the other side.
How do you
Thank you.
And the next upcoming, like
Please.
This war is just like 8 months old. This war is 8 years old. It's a Holocaust.
Oh, this woman is very interested in the title of the book. It's called Kiss the Red Stairs, The Holocaust Once Removed. Marsha, the title.
I'm not going to tell you. I'm sorry. It's a terrible answer. Like, buy the book. No, I feel like the book takes you on a journey to the point where you get to the explanation that I don't want to take that away from anyone's experience of reading the book. But I will say it is central to what we talked about in terms of the moment where I realized I had something that I had to do, that I had to do something for my father and myself and my son, and I didn't get to do it yet, actually. So, but I did write the book.
Yes, you did. And it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Leslie, are you going to jump up? Yeah.
This is on, so I'm going to, oh, there we go. I neglected to mention that books are for sale thanks to Book Warehouse. We would love for you to buy a copy, and we will have a signing table over here in the corner. If you can wear your mask for that, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you, you two, so much for this wonderful evening. Thank you.